Welcome to Listen Audiobooks, your free audiobook. I'm your host. Today we're exploring how to think, speak, and influence like a pro. This audiobook will transform how you think about this subject. Let's dive in. There is a moment most people never forget. You are in a room, a meeting, a dinner, a conversation that matters. And someone speaks. Not loudly, not aggressively. They simply open their mouth, and something shifts. The air changes, every head turns, every eye follows. And when they finish, people nod, people lean in, people act. You watched it happen. You felt it happen. And somewhere deep in your chest, a quiet voice whispered, "I want that." That voice was not envy. It was recognition. It was the part of you that already understood what your conscious mind was still catching up to. That the way a person thinks, speaks, and carries their ideas into the world is not just a personality trait or a lucky gift handed out to a fortunate few. It is a skill, a learnable, practicable, absolutely attainable skill. And the fact that you are here, right now, listening to these words, tells me something important about you. It tells me you are ready to stop watching from the outside and start building from the inside. Here is something nobody tells you early enough. The most influential people in any room are rarely the smartest. They are not always the most experienced, the most educated, or the most credentialed. What they have, what separates them from everyone else sitting at that same table, is clarity. They have learned to think with precision, speak with intention, and connect with the kind of authenticity that makes other people feel genuinely understood. That combination is quietly, powerfully magnetic, and it can be yours. But here is the honest truth we need to sit with before we go any further. Most of us were never taught how to do this. We were taught what to think, facts, formulas, rules, and procedures. We were rarely, if ever, taught how to think. We were taught to speak, grammar, vocabulary, volume, and pace. But almost nobody taught us the art of speaking in a way that moves people, that lands with weight, that lingers long after the conversation ends. So, if you have ever stumbled over your own words under pressure, if you have ever had a brilliant idea that somehow dissolved into nothing when you tried to express it, if you have ever walked away from an important conversation feeling like you left the best version of yourself sitting quietly in your own head, this is your turning point. What you are about to explore is not a collection of tricks or clever techniques you paste over who you already are. This is a deep and genuinely transformative look at the internal mechanics of influence. How the sharpest thinkers structure their minds before they ever open their mouths. How words, chosen with purpose, create trust, command attention, and inspire real action. And how you, exactly as you are, starting exactly from where you stand today, can step fully and confidently into the version of yourself that people remember. The room is waiting. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Expose the gap between how most people think and communicate versus how influential leaders do it, creating urgency to develop these transformational skills. There's a moment most people never notice. It happens in meetings, in conversations, in the quiet aftermath of a pitch or a presentation, or even just a casual exchange with someone you wanted to impress. It's the moment where you had something real to say, something you actually believed, something that mattered. And somehow, by the time the words left your mouth, it landed flat. The room stayed the same. The other person nodded politely. Nothing moved. And you walked away with that low, dull feeling that you almost said something important. Almost. That gap between what you meant and what actually landed is not a talent gap. It's not a confidence gap. It is a thinking and communication gap, and almost nobody teaches you how to close it. Here's what's fascinating about the people who do close it. You've met them. Maybe you've worked alongside one, or watched one in a room, and felt something shift in your chest that you couldn't quite name. These are the people who speak, and other people lean in. They ask a question, and the conversation changes direction entirely. They walk into uncertainty, and somehow make everyone around them feel steadier. They're not always the loudest, they're not always the most credentialed, but there is something about the way they think, and then translate that thinking into language, that operates on a completely different frequency than most of us. And the gap between how they operate and how most people operate is wider than you might want to believe. Most people think reactively. Something happens, and the mind scrambles to respond, to fill silence, to seem capable. Influential leaders think architecturally. They build understanding before they build sentences. They know what the other person needs to feel before they decide what they need to say. That's not a small difference. That is an entirely different relationship with thought itself. Most people communicate to express. Influential leaders communicate to move. There's a distinction there that changes everything. When your only goal is expression, you release what's inside you and hope someone catches it. When your goal is movement, when you want to shift someone's thinking, their decision, their trust, their action, you are suddenly responsible for the entire journey from your mouth to their mind. That responsibility sharpens everything. The hard truth is that most of us were never taught this. We were taught grammar. We were taught to speak up, to be polite, to structure an argument. But nobody sat us down and said, here is how persuasion actually works inside a human brain. Here is why some words create belief, and others create resistance. Here is how a pause, placed precisely, can do more work than a paragraph. Nobody told us that. So we've been improvising. And improvisation without a foundation is just noise dressed up as effort. You're listening to this because some part of you already knows the gap exists. You felt it. In the meeting where someone else got the credit for an idea you'd already had. In the negotiation that slipped sideways. In the relationship where you kept trying to explain something and the other person just never quite got it. That gap is closable, completely closable. But first, you have to see it clearly. You have to be willing to look at how you currently think and speak without defensiveness and ask a simple question. Is this actually working? Chapter 2. Introduce the 3 core pillars of influential thinking, speaking, and persuasion that separate ordinary communicators from those who command respect and drive action. So, now that you understand why most communication falls flat, let's talk about what actually works. There are 3 pillars, 3 foundational principles that separate the people who simply talk from the people who truly move others. And once you see them, you'll start noticing them everywhere. In the leaders you admire. In the conversations that stayed with you long after they ended. In the moments when someone said something and the whole room shifted. The first pillar is clarity, not simplicity, clarity. There's a difference, and it matters. Simplicity is about using easy words. Clarity is about knowing exactly what you mean before you open your mouth, and then finding the most direct path from your mind to someone else's. Most people skip this step. They speak while they think, hoping the right idea will show up somewhere in the middle of the sentence. Sometimes it does. More often, the listener is left doing the work of figuring out your point, and nobody wants to work that hard in a conversation. When you're clear, people don't just hear you, they trust you. Clarity signals confidence. It signals that you've done the thinking so they don't have to. That's a gift, and people remember who gives it to them. The second pillar is connection. This is where most technically skilled communicators still lose people. You can be articulate, well-prepared, even brilliant, and still leave people cold. Because connection isn't about what you know, it's about whether the other person feels seen. It's the difference between speaking at someone and speaking with them. When you connect, you're acknowledging the human on the other side of your words. You're letting them know that you understand something about their world, their fears, their hopes. And here's the thing, you don't have to have all the answers to create connection. You just have to be genuinely present. People can feel when you're really listening versus when you're just waiting for your turn to talk. They can feel when your words are crafted for them versus recycled from a script you use on everyone. Connection is the bridge that carries your message across. Without it, even the best ideas fall into the water. The third pillar is conviction. This one is quietly the most powerful of the three. Conviction is the energy behind your words. It's what makes someone stop scrolling, stop half listening, and actually pay attention. You've felt it before. Someone speaks, and something in you just sits up straighter. That's conviction. It's not volume, and it's not aggression. It's certainty. It's the sense that this person genuinely believes what they're saying, and that belief has weight. Conviction is contagious in the best possible way. When you speak with it, people lean in. When you lack it, no amount of polish can cover the gap. And the good news is that conviction isn't something you perform. It grows naturally when you do the inner work of actually deciding what you stand for, what you believe, and why it matters. Clarity, connection, conviction. These three pillars work together. They reinforce each other. Get all three aligned, and your communication stops being something people simply hear. It becomes something they feel. And feeling is what drives people to act. Chapter 3. Break down practical, step-by-step techniques for sharpening mental clarity, crafting compelling messages, and reading and adapting to any audience in real time. So, now that you understand why clarity matters, let's talk about how you actually build it, not as a concept, as a daily practice. Start with your thinking. Before you can say anything powerful, you have to know what you actually believe. That sounds obvious, but most people skip this step entirely. They open their mouths before their minds are ready. So here's what you do. When you're preparing for any important conversation, presentation, or even a difficult email, take 60 seconds and ask yourself one question. What is the single most important thing I want this person to walk away knowing? Just one thing. Not 5, not 3. 1. That constraint forces your brain to prioritize, and prioritization is the beginning of clarity. Once you have that core idea, you build outward from it. Think of it like a wheel with a hub. Your central message is the hub. Everything else you say, the stories, the data, the examples, those are the spokes. They only have value because they connect back to the center. If you find yourself saying something that doesn't connect to that hub, cut it, ruthlessly. Clarity isn't about saying more, it's about saying less, better. Now let's talk about how you craft the message itself. Strong communicators. Understand that language is not neutral. Every word you choose either opens a door or closes one. So train yourself to replace vague language with specific language. Instead of saying, "We should improve our process," say, "We need to cut response time from 48 hours to 24. Specific language creates a picture. Vague language creates fog. And people trust pictures. They get lost in fog. There's another technique here that changes everything. Lead with the outcome. Most people bury the point at the end. They set up context, explain background, and then finally reveal what they actually want. Flip that. Say the outcome first, then give the reasoning. When you do this, your listener isn't spending mental energy wondering where you're going. They're already with you. They're listening to understand, not to decode. Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading your audience in real time. This is a skill that separates good communicators from great ones, and it's something you can start developing immediately. Watch for what I call microsignals. These are the small, real-time clues your audience sends you constantly. A slight furrow of the brow means confusion. Slow down and clarify. A nod with eye contact means engagement. You're landing. Keep going. Crossed arms or a glance at a phone means you've lost them. Change something now. Don't wait. Adapt on the fly. The key to adapting well is staying curious instead of defensive. When you sense resistance, most people get louder or more insistent. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to get quieter and more curious. Ask a question. Invite them back in. Something as simple as, "Does that track with what you're seeing?" can completely shift the dynamic of a conversation. And remember this, you are not performing for an audience. You are in a conversation with a human being. When you hold on to that truth, your presence changes, your voice settles, your words land differently. People feel the difference, even if they can't name it. That shift in mindset is where real influence lives. Chapter 4. Share real-world scenarios and exercises that allow readers to immediately apply the pillars and techniques to their personal and professional relationships. So, let's get practical. Because everything you've been building, the awareness, the language shifts, the intentional pauses, none of it means anything until you actually use it. And the only way to use it is to put yourself in the situations where it matters. Think about the last difficult conversation you avoided. Maybe it was with a colleague who keeps interrupting you in meetings. Maybe it was with a partner who feels distant lately. Maybe it was with yourself, in the quiet moments when you know something needs to change, but you keep finding reasons to wait. That conversation, the one you've been circling around, that's your first assignment. Before you walk into it, do this. Spend 5 minutes writing down what you actually want from the exchange, not what you want to say, what you want to happen. There's a real difference there. When you're clear on the outcome, your words start organizing themselves around something solid instead of around your anxiety. Now here's a scenario that comes up constantly in professional settings. You're in a team meeting. Someone presents an idea that's flawed. You can see it clearly, but the room is nodding along. Most people stay quiet. They tell themselves it's not worth the friction. But silence in that moment isn't neutrality. It's a choice. And often, it's the wrong one. This is where your language does the heavy lifting. Instead of saying, "I don't think that will work," which closes the door, try, "I'm curious how we'd handle the situation where," and then name the specific gap you're seeing. You're not attacking the idea. You're inviting the room to think further. That single reframe can shift you from being seen as a critic to being seen as someone who thinks rigorously. That's influence. Quiet, earned, and lasting. Try this in your next meeting. Just once. Notice how the room responds differently to a question than to a contradiction. Now move it into your personal life. Think of someone you love who has a habit that genuinely frustrates you. Instead of the conversation you've had before, the one that always ends the same way, try leading with curiosity about their experience rather than your complaint about their behavior. Ask them something real, something you don't already know the answer to. People can feel when you're genuinely interested versus when you're building a case against them. And when they feel that genuine interest, their walls come down in a way that no argument ever could achieve. Here's a small daily exercise that will compound over time. Every evening, recall one conversation from your day. Ask yourself 3 things. Did I listen more than I spoke? Did my words reflect what I actually meant? And did the other person leave the interaction feeling understood? You don't need a perfect score. You just need the habit of looking. Because that's the truth about all of this. You don't transform the way you think, speak, and influence by reading about it, or even by listening to it. You transform by doing the small, uncomfortable thing in the real moment with the real person in front of you, over and over, until the new way stops feeling new and starts feeling like you. That's the work, and you are already doing it just by paying attention. Chapter 5. Issue a powerful call to action that challenges readers to commit to daily practice, embrace discomfort as growth, and step fully into their role as a pro-level influencer. You've come a long way. Think about where you started, maybe uncertain about your words, second-guessing how you came across in a room, wondering whether people were really listening when you spoke. And now, you're here, at the end of this journey, holding something genuinely powerful in your hands, not just knowledge, a new way of moving through the world. But here's what I need you to understand before we part ways. Everything you've learned, every insight about how to think more clearly, communicate more precisely, and move people toward meaningful action, none of it counts for a single thing if you keep it in your head. Knowledge sitting still is just potential, and potential without motion is nothing. It's time to move. So here is your challenge. Starting tomorrow, not next week, not when life slows down, not when you feel ready. Tomorrow, you practice. Pick one thing. One conversation where you choose your words with intention. One moment where you catch yourself rushing and you slow down instead. One interaction where you listen twice as long as you speak. Just one. Because mastery doesn't arrive in a single dramatic leap. It shows up in the small, consistent decisions you make when no one is watching, when it would be easier to coast. The pros you admire. They didn't wake up one day transformed. They showed up on the days they didn't feel like it. They spoke when their voice shook. They stayed in difficult conversations instead of retreating. And they did it again the next day. That's the whole secret, really. Repetition with awareness, showing up and paying attention. It's unglamorous, and it is absolutely everything. Now, discomfort is going to visit you. Count on it. There will be moments when you try a new approach and it feels awkward, when you reach for a more precise word and stumble, when you attempt to lead a conversation and it doesn't land the way you imagined. Good. That feeling isn't failure. That feeling is your signal that you are growing. The edge of your comfort zone is where your skills are actually being built. Don't run from that feeling. Recognize it, breathe through it, and keep going. You are not too late. You are not too quiet, too loud, too inexperienced, or too set in your ways. You are someone who chose to learn, and that choice already separates you from the majority of people who complain about their influence but never invest in it. You made a different decision. Honor that decision by following through. Think about the people in your life, your team, your family, your community, who need you to show up as the communicator you are becoming. Leadership isn't reserved for titles. Influence isn't a gift handed to a chosen few. It is a discipline practiced by those willing to do the daily work. And you are one of those people. I know that because you've stayed, you've listened, you've leaned in. So, step into it. Fully, unapologetically. With every conversation, every room you walk into, every idea you put into the world. Think with clarity. Speak with purpose. And lead with the kind of quiet, grounded confidence that doesn't demand attention. It simply earns it. This is who you are becoming. Now go be that person. Thank you for listening to Listen Audiobooks. I'm your host. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you for the next episode.